Good morning, Dan and Amy. So, story in the Washington Times this week: number of sanctuary cities in America nearing 500. This from a group that tracks cities that so designate themselves. The Ohio Jobs and Justice Political Action Committee has the one adding and subtracting based on what cities decide to do. ICE said last year, according to this Washington Times piece, 279 municipalities refused to cooperate on at least one case in fiscal year 2016, refused to cooperate with ICE. All told, those sanctuary cities released more than 2,000 illegal immigrants back onto the streets that ICE agents had been trying to deport. So you're left with the question, what kind of sense does that make in terms of public policy and cities so designating themselves, or courts, as in the case we talked about earlier in the week, the one judge who helped a defendant who was in court for a DUI escape out the back door to avoid ICE agents that were waiting to detain him. But what kind of public policy sense does that make? Why would you want people here illegally, particularly people who are here illegally and committing additional crimes, to be released onto the streets to prey on law-abiding American citizens? That seems like a fair question. So we thought we should get a mayor of one of these sanctuary cities to discuss the topic, and we're fortunate to have the mayor of Urbana, Illinois, Laurel Prussing, to join us now to discuss this issue. Mayor Prussing, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
So the rationale for the sanctuary city designation in Urbana?
Well, first of all, Urbana did this back in 1986.
Okay.
And it was in response to refugees from Central America. So the only people I've greeted so far were refugees from Indiana. They were the Indiana legislature. Democrats.
Yes.
They came to Urbana, so I said, we're ready for Guatemalan refugees, but we'll accept Indiana legislators.
That's welcoming.
Yes, our sheriff is a Republican, and he's the one that runs the jail. The city of Urbana does not let prisoners go. Our sanctuary city status is based on concern for human rights, which Urbana has a very long history of being concerned about, and which churches are concerned about, and many people. So it shouldn't be focused on criminals, because certainly if somebody commits a crime, we think they should be held accountable. But what we're talking about is if someone asks for help from the Urbana police don't go and first ask them what their immigration status is. And I think the schools in Illinois are not allowed to ask immigration status, because you ask the schools how many children here are illegal. They can't tell you, because they don't keep those statistics, and that's by law.
Well, aren't you afraid that somebody will commit a crime, someone that's here illegally will commit a crime in another city and then come to hide in Urbana?
Well, I don't know if that's a problem. It seems like most of our jail population is homegrown. We have a lot of immigrants here. It's an international city because of the University of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the focus is on what if they're committing a crime. Well, if people are committing a crime, they're going to be held accountable. What we're talking about is, should people routinely be asked what their immigration status is? And when this Trump proclamation came out, people were just terrified. And these are people who aren't breaking laws. They contribute to society. They got here probably through very difficult treks, and so we're just our philosophy is treat people decently and not assume that they're criminals before anything else.
Well, I understand. I understand that, but I guess the intersection between human rights and federal law enforcement, it doesn't seem to me, and working with federal law enforcement agencies, it doesn't seem to me it is violative of human rights to suggest, if you have a reasonable suspicion to believe someone broke a law, any law, that you inquire about it. And why?
Right.
Why?
We're
Not
doing that. We're not saying that anybody can do anything they want, and if they're an illegal alien, they can get away with it. We're not saying that.
No, I understand.
That's really a fake argument.
That's not my argument. That's not my argument.
What is your argument?
My argument is, if you suspect someone of a crime and being here illegally is a crime, then why couldn't you, if you reasonably suspect, why is that law exempt from reasonable suspicion?
Okay, the federal government is the agency that's responsible for enforcing immigration laws. Local governments are not. The resolution that we passed said that we will follow any court order, but it is not our responsibility to do the job for ICE.
Well, I understand.
And the sheriff said the same thing, and he's a Republican. So we have, a lot of people who understand that there are divisions between levels of government.
Well,
and we cooperate with all kinds of levels of government, but we can't take on their job for them. And we have legal advice on this, so we think we're on very good ground what we're doing. It's not that we'll never cooperate. We will cooperate if it's appropriate. We don't enforce copyright laws. Those are federal laws. So you can't expect a local government to just enforce every law there is on the books in any other jurisdiction, because we can't do it.
Well, speaking of an argument no one's making, no one is making that argument. Here's the argument. The argument is that your police will work, for example, with DEA when it comes to interdicting drug trafficking and gang crime. So they'll work with them. That's not doing the DEA's job for them. That's not doing federal law enforcement's job for them. It's working with them in a task force setting, for example, just to use a hypothetical. So why, with respect to state and federal law, are you okay with the idea of working collaboratively with federal law enforcement, except in this area? You see? Why this exception?
That we don't, as I said, there's other areas that we don't work with them, and that would be something, as I said, like copyright law. If it's strictly a federal thing, we can't take on that responsibility. And so you'll have to talk to an attorney about some of your questions, but we have legal advice, which we consider to be very sound legal advice, and that's what we're following.
Well, I understand what potentially could pass muster with certain judges, and thus the designation of nearly 500 cities as sanctuary cities. Okay. This is more of a public policy discussion, not a legal discussion. So in terms of like the public policy propriety behind this designation and what it achieves, you talked about people being frightened because of Trump's executive order with respect to a half a dozen Muslim majority countries and a temporary halt. Do we make public policy based on people's irrational fears, or do we make public policy, particularly at the local level, based on doing government's first job, which is to provide for the physical safety of its residents, of its constituents?
Well, we do make public policy based on what the public thinks, and we had meetings we had a meeting at the Champaign Public Library. The room was completely filled. People are very concerned about treating all people fairly, and so that is a very big public sentiment around here. That this is our policy: is that we will do our job, but we will help people without first asking them what their immigration status is.
Well, Mayor, have you had some pushback from some constituents or people that live in Urbana who do not want to be a sanctuary city? What are you hearing from them?
Well, some people don't want to be a sanctuary city, but everything we do in Urbana, we have a lot of public participation, and so the city council had this on the agenda and debated it, and we had public input for hours, and most people are in favor of it. That is just our particular culture, and apparently that's the culture in Chicago. The city council approved sanctuary city in Chicago. I think we're the only one who has done this south of I-80, but I think there are maybe 3 or 4. Evanston. So you could ask that question in Chicago or Evanston, and yes, they'll tell you that is the majority opinion. I don't get uniform approval of anything. It's always what the majority is.
No, understood. I'm just trying to get the rationale in terms of the city council's decision there. I know you're not doing this individually.
The rationale, you take the woman who took shelter in the church, in the Catholic Church in Chicago.
Oh, I remember her.
The rationale from religious people is their religion, that you should treat the stranger as your neighbor. So that is the religious philosophy, and that's sort of a civil libertarian philosophy as well. So you have deep cultural things here in this country about treating immigrants fairly. There's also deep cultural things about prejudice. So in Urbana, the the treat everybody fairly prevails.
Well, yeah, actually, I would suggest everybody's not being treated fairly because there are people trying to
Well,
emigrate.
okay, that's your opinion, but you don't live in Urbana, so I welcome you to come to the city council and say your views.
Well, I mean, I don't need to live.
I don't have time, but anyway. Anyway, I'm just telling you that there's different political philosophies around the country.
Oh, thank you.
And
I'm
so-
aware of this, and
Yes.
we're trying
Okay.
to we're trying to explore them. That's the point, and I don't need to live in
Okay.
Urbana to explore an argument with you. So, for example,
Okay.
practically speaking, let's just get practically speaking. If someone is arrested for DUI in Urbana, that's a local matter, county matter.
Right.
What happens there? So, in the case, like I mentioned at the outset of the segment, with the person arrested for DUI, and then the judge helped that person out the back door to avoid ICE agents. In a situation like that, where somebody has been arrested for a crime that is not related to their immigration status, does Urbana law enforcement, local prosecutors
we
work with?
wouldn't do that. This person, we wouldn't. We would just treat them as any other person that got arrested for that crime. They would just go through the process.
And if ICE
Okay,
inquired,
I don't know of any judge that's going to let somebody out the back door.
and if ICE inquired about them, what would you do at the local level?
If ICE inquired about them at the court, they wouldn't be calling the city of Urbana. They'd be calling the courts. Okay.
Okay. I mean, that's okay.
I mean, it's not a city function. So you're talking about the county, and our job.
The
is
arresting
the police.
officer. The arresting officer is a material part of that case against that individual. So I mean, you're kind of
Okay.
ducking the question.
I'm not ducking the question. I'm answering the question. You want to know about a judge letting someone out?
I'm not
That's
talking
not
about
an
it.
Urbana judge. You know, the city has no control over what the judges do. That's
I
up to them.
I understand. I'm saying what is the protocol within the city police department with police officers?
Protocol in the police department is to deal with the situation and not ask someone what their immigration
There you go.
status is.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Laurel
Thank you.
Prussing, the mayor of Urbana. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.